What the hell was that? Okay, I guess we keep going. When I was 9 years old, I saw a man die on the television and didn't know how to save him. As I sat throughout the rest of the day, playing over and over in my mind, I stared down to my mother's old silver mirror, one that she kept on her nightstand. I didn't go into my mother's room much anymore, not since she died. Didn't need to, so I just left it as it was. But summer it was cold, a little colder than the rest of the house. Just enough to realize it was strange. More than that. A little colder, a little drier, no more. For a while I just sat and thought of her. Never been allowed in her room as a child and it still felt off limits. Every second was as if she would come in and drag me out by the ear, screaming all the way. Once again, the inevitable didn't come. All here was green, verdant, covered in pictures of little birds, curling back at the corners. When the sun hit the sparrows that lied in the walls, they reflected, rippling across as if 1,000 little eyes watching me. Still watch me after all these years. I took the silver mirror down with me to the porch, pushing it back into the thick air of the old house. I cleaned it off with some old cleaning solution I found under the sink. They were peeling and yellowed by time. By the time I was done, it sparkled, as if newer than I ever thought it could yet. But it was pointless. The mirror was empty, just dull and clouded glass, bare. Not even a reflection of the kitchen behind me. I was left with nothing at the end but a trinket, something to decorate the old dust-covered shelf. There was something, though. I could feel it, staring at me every time I passed the mirror. Some watching eye buried somewhere I couldn't see. I hadn't come out the woods alone that night. When I left my reflection, something had followed me, working its way into the space where my reflection was, trailing me. Some wandering eye, hidden behind something. Some sheet of empty white space hung in the air, and when I turned it would peek around. I saw it a couple times, just a drop of shadow in half a window, a smear in a puddle, a moment hidden between the ripple and a cup of coffee. It couldn't quite last, staring out at me for a second, always taken away before I could look back. Ever present, ever hidden. I tried, as far as I could, to get a good look, a look good enough to see it properly, but it was always just half hidden. It was like a ghost, how it flickered across mirrors, dancing through dimming lights, always just out of reach, always hidden, well just hidden enough that I couldn't meet its eye. And still it followed me, lingering in the space of my reflection left, wearing it like a clock, or cloak, or a second skin. I saw it for a moment as a broken lounge security mirror in a safe way, again bent around a bottle of wine, taken from behind the label, again as it stayed on the glass door as I left. A smear in the rainbow of an oil-soaked puddle as I drove home, and eyes flickering out, a little braver now, a little closer. Shyness maybe, it kept it hidden, but it became intent now, creeping closer. I tried to close in on it and turn. Curiosity was overwhelming, almost. I still felt the space where my reflection would used to sit. I still dragged it around after me, and still I knew nothing about my passenger. It was a long night, a cold night. I woke in the forest, still in my nightgown and housecoat. I had no memory of coming out there, a memory of where I had been before, a memory of anything but my head hitting the pillow hours earlier, nothing in my pockets, nothing but the clothes on my back. The night was dark and all I could do but move towards whatever pocket of moonlight I could see between the trees. Though it was the middle of the night, I felt rested, deeply rested, as if I slept until the morning. Nothing of it appeared as a dream in the darkened forest. Bats danced above, throwing shadows across the pockets of moonlight, and below animals rustled throughout the undergrowth. And I just drifted, hands in my pockets. I drifted between the islands of moonlight, hoping each would take me a little closer to home. On the surface of the good God Lake, here from far off, you could see ladders of moonlight ripple across the water at night, when the moon is bright enough, and as they saw gently, they hypnotize you, drawing you in. It took a moment by the shore to gather my thoughts, but nothing would come. Nothing of the night, nothing of the dream. The water said nothing, either. The surface of the lake empty. Nothing of the sky above. Nothing on the rocky shore below. There it was, though hidden between the ripples in the water as it was carried gently by the wind. Stalker. Not a stalker, really. Not really. The follower, the watcher, the thing in between the world, staring out when it could, and sinking back into hiding. I sat, staring out over the water in turn, trying to get a clearer view of it, but the water wouldn't settle, and the watcher stayed hidden. Not from the water, though. From the forest. A woman I didn't know, a woman I remembered, who sat with me that night, who spoke with me. She touched my arm gently with the back of her hand, and with the other she reached down, twirling her finger through the lake top, sending out little waves wherever she went. And as the waves circled outwards, they changed, took on form, shape, and they took their place as actors upon the blackened stage. And as she whispered in my ear, they followed her along. At first the road was busy, packed side to side with trade caravans, pilgrims, refugees from foreign lands, and merchants of all types. But the further he walked, the hotter the sun seemed to grow, day after day, and the emptier the wide road got. By all rights, the road should have been full all the way to the sea, but the sun was beating down so hard across the rocky deserts of the south that any sane man had stayed in, and any who strayed out for too long felt the dusty air scrape away his throat and tongue until he couldn't speak. But Ardashir felt nothing of the pain in his mouth, devil on his tongue taking the brunt of the dry air, and pushed down towards the sea. Her voice was familiar somehow. I couldn't quite place it. Flat, almost monotonous, just a little tiny, like the announcer on a supermarket loudspeaker, had hidden behind the radio. He still didn't know where he was going to, but he went regardless. As he lay and slept under palms on the cold desert nights, he found himself dreaming in the language of devils, and of clouds forming above him. The clouds would open with rain, flooding down into the valleys of the desert, filling up the space between the mountains, and he would rise up on the waves. Water carrying him above the mountaintops towards the sun. Every morning he would wake up to a little heaviness in his limbs, a little more pain in his mouth, and a little more heat in the desert air. Halfway between his home and the gulf he camped at a hermitage, and spent time with the teacher there. First the two would sit together, teacher muttering to him and Ardashir muttering back in his guttural new tongue. Both spoke the language of devils, though no two devils had the same language, nor the same name. Though as the two spent more time together, they found they could talk through the language of the body. When they were inside, hidden from the boiling sun, the lines and marks across the skin would seem to dance across their bodies, forming into words and shapes for just a second before exploding outwards into patterns and forming again. And these, Ardashir saw a great flock of birds bursting out across the sky, dancing across the clouds in spirals and lines and casting shadows over the sea. And in Ardashir, the teacher saw a mighty forest shooting up the sky, trees dwarfing the largest of the buildings as they rose up across his skin. But as the shapes rolled across the skin, peeled, and the way it died, shedding past their feet onto the floor. She wrapped around me, neck on neck, and as her skin pressed in further against mine, it gave way, her body falling into me and turning into dust, carried over the deadened lake by the wind. I sat by the shore and watched until the waves stopped, the surface flat again, empty, and hoped I would glimpse something in the water, but I found nothing. Nothing but moonlight, separated, splayed out across the lake. The watcher appeared to have gone, perhaps hidden now so well I couldn't find them, and I was alone. The lake now was still, the world still as well. The trees had quieted, not silence, but tame, only the occasional rustle. No more songs or calls or howls to interrupt the peace of the forest. The moon was out through the clouds that had blocked it off before, so large overhead that it seemed to sit in front of them, and the forest was so bright by the clearing that it could have been day. I knew my way back from the lake, so I left the quiet water and made my way home. I moved between pillars of light as they worked through the trees, scattered and diffused by leaf and branch so they lit the forest like an old fluorescent lamp. black and even. As I went, something quietly rustled behind me, almost matching me step for step. But every time I checked, there was nothing there. I passed through a pocket of darkness, moonlight blocked out by the heavy branches of an old growth tree, and I came out on the other side in a different place. Another forest, this one in the daytime, bright and peaceful. The trees were further apart, the sun having no problem finding its way through, and the air was cool and warm. Birds blanketing the air with song. I came out upon a clearing, all wide and rolling grass and wildflowers, and for a moment I saw something on the other side. Just as my eyes met it, I saw it advance back into the woods in a flurry of movement. I blinked, and as my eyes opened again, I passed through the other side of the veil of darkness, back into the sleeping forest. The forest was peaceful, still, though now it was hard to orient myself. I still heard the rustling behind me, but a little quieter now, as if it had dropped back, unwilling to pass under the shadow of the old oak. Another sound came, though, this one louder, closer. Not as much the rustling of an animal, but the stamping feet of a man, maybe more than one, right in front of me. I saw them in a silhouette first, the fluorescent moon filtering in slow through the leaves, saying the old tableau, yes, it's a little bit green, just a little. It was a man, another man after him, and another behind, all holding hands as they went along, stomping their feet across the undergrowth, and cracking the branches and scattering, of animals below, whether from some grim march but from a dance, a simple, languid dance, just a few moments of the feet that carried them forward. I remember them from the dream that Ardashir had. I'd met them in the past on the way to the Gulf, and there they'd been broken, and now they were whole. The man in front led them forward now with vitality, each as tall as the other, each as strong as the other, all holding hands as they danced on through the forest. It was all in silhouette, though all the shadow play against the light of the moon. I couldn't see the detail in their face, nor what they wore. They just went on, the shape of men, quickly through the clearing in something that seemed like joy. The rustling from behind almost snuck up on me, but I stopped just right where I was. I could feel it there, watching the scene alongside me. As I turned, it was gone. And as I turned back, the line of men was gone too. Just a quiet noise in the distance now, sinking into the forest embrace. Now I was alone again, under the flattened light of the moon, everything hazy, half-baked in shadow. All I could do was make my way further home. For a moment I heard again the movement of feet behind me. When I looked back, they were gone, but I didn't look back. I went on forward, nerves building up as someone walked behind me. Though my body was crying out for me to do it, I never looked back. Eyes went on through the moonlight, through the quiet forest, out toward the glimmering tree line, porch light seeping in now. Once again it matched me step for step, slowing and turning around any pockets of dark I passed through. Whenever the moonlight disappeared, everything was once again became inverted. Fields of endless green rolling out before me, and when it flickered back, the world was flat again. I was back in the forest at night. When I went to pass through the tree line, my nerve was close to breaking, and though I shivered in the night air and the fear built up in me so high that it trembled, ready to collapse the walls around it, spilled out across the forest floor, it kept my nerve. It followed me still, out of the tree line, rustling steps turning into dull thud as they met the grass, and still it matched me step for step, breath for breath, cough for cough, and sigh for sigh. I closed my eyes as I came to the back window, partially for fear of what I could see, partially for fear of having come this far with nothing to show, and with that I made my way back inside. The fluorescent bulb of the kitchen was indistinguishable from the scattered moonlight, flickering now and then as if I passing behind the clouds or the trees. At first I went to close the door, but the last second I pulled my hand away, still facing forward. I left it open for whatever was behind me. From there I went and stood around the corner, went against the living room wall and listened and waited. The footfall slowed. Now that it didn't have to match my own, it was heavier now, too. Bending down against the tired floor of the kitchen, but it didn't linger long. One lap of the table was all I needed before wandering back out into the forest, and I closed the door behind it. Colder now, clearer inside than it was in the forest. The footsteps finally faded into the distance. I gathered up the nerve to look, and I was hit with a sudden wave of warmth, like I had opened the window on a hot day. It pressed against me, the warm air as I looked out to the kitchen, but otherwise it was empty. Even the strange wall of warmth trickled away through the open door. It was when I walked over to shut it that I noticed it wasn't here, but in the reflection of the window. The room passed behind a cloud, and then the glass blackened. A pair of eyes flickered through, looking over from the kitchen table in the reflection. Just as I tried to meet his gaze, the moon came back out, lighting up the forest. The reflection faded, as hard as I tried to glimpse it. I had no choice but to wait, to glimpse it again. Standing there by the window, I watched the faint glimmer of the clouds in the distance, and for one to cover the moon over, but they refused to come. Moved in, teasing, columns passing just over the edges. Crossing the forest in shadows as I stopped just short of the window. I sat and watched. I just sat and watched and waited. It was sudden, a cloud I didn't see, drawn from the other, from empty sky. The world blackened, the window lit up, and I saw it, and it saw me back. The head of a deer, resting in the middle of the reflection of the table, its eyes alight, tracking me as I watched for the space in between the window and the world, lay out on its side, no blood coming from its severed neck. Its mouth was moving, slowly but deliberately. It was saying something, but I couldn't hear. I pressed myself in close to the glass, hoping I'd in some way get closer to a reflection. The deer's eyes narrowed as I went. I tried. I was trying to read it somehow, just for a lack of a better idea. I still couldn't tell what it was saying. The sound stopped at the window, blocked out, left it carrying into the real world. Out of desperation, I whipped around to look at the kitchen table as it was, hoping the watcher would appear before me. When I turned back to the window, it was gone. There was no me, nor deer, nothing in space behind the window, but as I turned to the table, I found something where it had been. I stood and watched again, and I waited for another cloud, but still they mocked me, passing me just by. And it was an hour or so later, maybe two, when I realized it was pointless. The cloud pressed right up against the moon, and wind picking up and ushering it along. And as it went by, passing over the top of it, the moon lingering in front, still bathing the world in light. It was a strange joke. Demoralized, I went back up to bed and finished out the night. Couldn't forget it, nor take it off my mind. Muttering deer lips moving, glaring back at me from the window with those mocking eyes. They had something to tell me, something I had to know, but I couldn't hear it. That could have been the last moment when I turned. Could have been judged and found wanting. Couldn't hold my nerve. I proved myself a coward that had been left here. Still it followed me though. Still it kept its eyes on me. Still half hidden. Still tucked away in the space where my reflection used to be. And still I waited for another chance. I dropped the endless greenery overgrown. Climbed the trunks of trees and smothering them so all the world was green. I dreamed of wildflowers, bees in the meadow, of sun and spring and the songs of birds. I dreamed of shoots coming up from the ground. I flew heavy in the trees. And I woke up feeling like shit. The moon was still out, so bright it could have been the day. I didn't see you in the mirror. I didn't see myself either. There's another world there now. Behind the glass, the world rented and overgrown, taken by the earth. The safe way that sat behind the security mirror had been consumed by green entirely. Flowers pressing out from the tops of shelves. Fire taken down from the gaps in the ceiling tiles as moths clambered up the walls. Of course, I found some way. I suppose into the space where my reflection used to be. I had taken it back. He was still watching me though, from that space behind the mirror, and I still felt his gaze on my back as he followed me around the safe way. Man with the blue eyes. He was glaring angrier now. I'd seen him before, and I tried to ignore him. Even if I had wanted to pay him mine, I wouldn't have been able to focus. Everywhere I looked, I saw the other world, blanketed in the moss and grass and vines and flowers. This was a glimpse too thin to see properly, too pale, sat between the glass and reflection stretched out. While I left to speed up my walk, making sure I had some distance from him just in case, but when I saw the note on my car, I practically ran over. For a moment, he feigned as if he'd follow me, but at the last second he hesitated, idling by the front window, still glaring over as I snatched the note from the door. Somebody had pinned it there with a little magnet. Just some character I didn't recognize, and as soon as I got into the truck, I pressed it against the dashboard and read it top to bottom. As I set off the next day, Ardashir stared into the lines on his hands. He seemed to move under his gaze, shifting and sliding with the heat of the sun. As he not slow, but showed the few fellow travelers he met, they would snap back to place, soon to remain understand. Soon Ardashir learned to talk through the movements of his eyes and his face. Outside of the mouth, he lived in silence, and in the silence found a greater language in the movements of the universe, and in the patterns of the world, and the worlds on the face and the body. And this he learned to communicate past language, past culture and creed, and in this he learned the words of the devil on his tongue. He learned as the devil dreamed, the devil did not split their language to sound chaos as people thought. For all we know, no two devils speak the same language, but to hide their speech from the gods. We learned that human language is not born from the gods, punishing the humans at Babel. It isn't thought, but humans learning that they must hide their language from the gods, but out of need to communicate they belong to be loved, failing. And he learned the punishment handed down to the humans was to keep them from reading the words on the body, enslaving them to the spoken tongue. Now man, communicating only through speech, he lost his ability to read what he wants, having only the option to know what is told to him. Every day he tried to talk with the devil on his tongue, and every day the devil didn't answer. Every night he dreamt of falling, first to recover a cloud and then through a square of green earth, through a square of deep fresh water and back to the clouds and the land. Every night he woke paralyzed with another devil on his chest. It is common for devils to follow travelers that they think will die, hopes of finding something precious they left behind. And some days he thought it was right too, but he still pressed on toward the sea, where waiting for him there. As soon as I hit the bottom, I went back up to the top, reading it over and over again, digging it so deep into my hypnotic trance that I didn't notice him for quite a while. Stood in front of the window, glaring straight in at me. When I did see him, it came suddenly, and I dropped the note in shock. I back slammed against the inside of the door hard, enough to rattle the window. In between us were endless fields of green, pillars of moss, swallowing distant road of streetlights, and pylons until they joined hands with the vine-drunk trees. And from as close as he could get, he glared at me, a glare that passed straight through me, staring through the car and world around us. As soon as I could stop my hands from shaking, I reached for the steering wheel, throwing the truck into gear and peeling out of the parking lot. For a moment I thought he would chase me, or I left into the bed of the truck, but he just stood, furious in his eyes, just glaring. I saw him again in a dream that night, a dream of endless summer, endless fields of wildflowers and grass, and all of his anger was gone. He lay in the flowers, arms out like he was making the angels in the snow, just smiling up at the world without a care. When I tried to look where he was, it nearly knocked me off my back, and I had to scramble away and cradle with my eyes, almost blinded. He was just staring at the sun, eyes open and blinking. I stumbled away from him, a faint after-image burned into my eyes, and as I turned, I saw it again, this time whole. The deer now mounted to the top of his body, long and thin. A trail of blood was leaking out of his mouth. Then I moved towards him, stumbling, still half blind. He ran, and as he ran, I tried to run after him, but I didn't go past the tree line. Collapsing into the wildflower, and I just sat and stared at him, half hidden in the darkness. And he stood and stared back, eyes catching the light behind him. There was something there, I realized now, something in the light, something beyond the sun. In my desperation, I couldn't quite see. I could see a glimmer of it, reflected in the deer's eyes, but I couldn't make out any detail, and I couldn't make it whole. I tried to get closer again, going forward slow, trying to spook it, but it just bounded away into the forest, dragging the glimmer with it. Turning over on my back, eyes so burning, I tried to look again. Once again, the sun pushed me away. By the time I dragged myself up to look for the reflection in my man's blue eyes, he was already gone. Another collapsed back into the ground. Earth rose over me, and as it did, I woke up. Covered in sweat, and the dream lingered. I didn't forget a second. I didn't even forget the image of the glimmer in the deer's eyes. Down on something I couldn't quite see. It was still night when I woke, but at first it seemed to be day. Light was pouring in through the window. The gaps in the curtain lit up so bright they hurt my eyes. But as I adjusted to the light and looked over to the forest, I saw the sky half black, only staying white by some light from the ground. And the forest spilling out through the leaves and branches, just bright enough to drown out the stars. At first I thought the forest was on fire. panic gripping me for a moment, but there was no smoke, no smell, no crackling of flame or flickering of the light. It was even constant and steady, just glowing. Maybe it mirrored the moon, hung lower than I thought it should, larger and brighter than I'd ever seen. Full? Was it ever not full? As hard as I thought, I couldn't remember it waxing nor waning for quite a while. Now it was full, always full. They followed me for a while, as I went to the lake and I paid them no mind. It wasn't like the water, careful and imperious, and how it could match my steps. These things almost stumbled after me, hiding behind the trees and crackling through branches, nervous and shy. I knew it was a lake, of course. The closer I got, the brighter I found it, until the forest was lit up better than I ever was in a day. Clearly in light, not a shadow nor a spot of darkness to be found. It almost blinded me as I stepped down to the clearing, and I had to cover my eyes with one hand as I stumbled back. The lake was ablaze, the water filled entirely with light, consumed by it. I couldn't look directly at it. All I could do was hide amongst the trees. Things that had followed me there scattered back as I went, pushing further into the forest. The air was ablaze as well. The night was still cold. Light pushed all the way up toward the sky. Little motes of white dancing upwards from the burning lake, like fireflies, lazy and slow. Covering my eyes, squinting and pushing forward, it was only then that I saw it. The motes of light were being carried up by drifting down, like maple seeds on the wind. They spun gently, drifting down through the air and resting in the burning lake, sinking down into the water, seeping in with fire. The moon was lower now, larger, so big it blacked out almost the entire sky. It was as if it would collapse in one clearing at any moment, barely a mile up, burning with light. One of the moon seeds drifted by me, whirling as it went. As I covered my eyes with my hand, I reached the other out to touch it, pushing out past the trees. It was cold, freezing cold, and as the seeds drifted down, my soul rose up. Everything for just a moment was light. Everything was weightless and full, and meeting the ground again almost knocked the breath out of my lungs. I glimpsed again something while I was up there, something so bathed in light that I couldn't see it but in silhouette. It was the shape of something beautiful. As I slammed back onto my own body, everything for a moment was black, and when I came back around, I lay between the trees by the good God lake, the night dark and warm. For a moment I scrambled around in panic, grabbing onto the branches of a tree for comfort. But soon the night air woke me up, just a breeze coming in over the lake, and I just sat there and tried to understand. I had a glimpse of it beyond the darkness. The world no longer felt complete. It was like a stage, all cardboard trees and dull brown paint. The moon was smaller now, retreating back behind the crowds. The only thing that touched the lake was the dull reflection of clouds, burst occasionally by the ripples of the wind across the surface. There was no light left, the world empty, and the silhouette of what I'd seen wouldn't leave my mind, though I still couldn't understand it. I saw them first as waves, tiny waves crashing against the rippling of the wind on the water, and I heard them as the faintest splash, the gentlest touch against the deadened lake. There were silhouettes too, subtle now, just shadowed against the faint light of the moon, and they danced across the surface of the lake, the line of men all still holding hands. It was a languid kind of dance, all slow turns, into the footwork, just atop the water. He sometimes did begin as he landed and turned, breaking the surface just for a moment. Other than that, they were utterly silent, and I watched them as they went. In turn, they paid me no notice, none at all, and soon they stepped off the surface of the lake, leaving glistening footprints across the rocks and dirt. They went on to the forest, once again, disappearing between the trees and into darkness, leaving me alone with the darkened water. Not alone, no, not quite. Things that had followed me out were still here, still hidden back in the tree line, peeking out whenever they could. They didn't watch me intently, like the watcher that lived in the space where my reflection once was. They were curious things, nervous things that skated around, keeping the distance, always scanning the horizon, always shivering, always afraid. They watched with me as the dancers went further into the forest, and some of them followed along. Just the bursts of movement through the undergrowth, and some lingered with me, scattering as I made my way back through the tree line, back towards home. The porch light is flickering when I get back. The thing that followed me stopped. They don't dare go further. Through the back window into the kitchen, I see endless green, endless color, all but the sun. The old kitchen table is broken, covered in moss, and a young aspen just through the vine-covered refrigerator, piercing straight through its back. The door swung open. When I get in, he's waiting for me on the table. He's muttering, but I can't hear him. Then hear just a faintest sound of speech, like somebody is speaking on the other side of a wall. Maybe he's speaking a language I don't understand. Maybe German, maybe French. Not too far off from my own. I can't hear him, but I can see his mouth move. Everything is drowned out by some great crashing sound, and once I get to his mouth, the louder it gets. The crashing of waves, the roaring of some terrible wind, drowning him out. I press my ear up against his mouth, but I still can't quite make out what he's trying to tell me. It's like I can see the outline of what he's saying, the silhouette, hazy in the sun, and the heat, edges bending slowly, unstable. I can't quite make it out properly. I can see the waves, now on the wall on the other side of the kitchen, crashing through the paint, rain pelting down from above. I can feel the wind. I can feel it howling in my skull, but I can't get closer to him. I can't hear what he's trying to say. Close my eyes and all I see is waves falling in buildings, crashing and breaking and falling apart. There's nothing in the sky, no sun, no moon, just a wall of black cloud, pouring down rain. Suddenly the sea is still, just an instant. Waves coming like dogs being fed, laying back into the depths until the sea is flat. It's level and flat, I mean. The clouds part, and just for a moment I feel the warmth of the sun on my face. Then I fall back into my own body. The chair collapses backward as I fall back into myself. The force throwing me halfway across the kitchen. It is daytime. I hear a knock on the front door, but by the time I reach it, they're already gone. The knocking kept happening, but nobody ever came. Every time I would scramble to answer, and every time I would find nothing but empty space. Sometimes a burst of movement somewhere far off in the corner of my eye. But every time I tried, I sat by the couch, on the couch by the door. Sometimes I waited on the front step, but every time they made it away before I could get there. Only just caught them. This time in the corner of my eye, and I saw them running and I tried to chase. They left no trail on the muddy ground, but I caught another flurry of movement towards the abandoned houses and I ran. There, the trail went cold, although I looked around everywhere I could. I had missed a second flash of movement, and they made it away. All I could do was prowl around the abandoned houses like some lost spirit, searching just looking for a sign. In one, the house where Tesmans used to live in, an old board had started to sag off the window frame, and as I grasped, the full lid came tumbling off entirely. As it did, and I peered in through the dusty old window, I saw a flurry of movement. Not just a single burst, but the scattering of a herd, like a flock of birds fleeing a gunshot. It was all over in a moment, but it brought about a fire in me. I set myself over and over against the old door, grabbing the handle and tried to drag it open, but it wouldn't budge. There was no more movement in the window, and I moved on, around the back. When I went by the back door, I found it bolted shut with a padlock. Heavy wooden boards covering the window in the middle from the inside. I passed around, rolled back around, checking the front door again, peering in through the layer of dust that covered the window. When I came back around, it was ajar. It opened just slightly. The old padlock nowhere to be seen. And I went in. Inside it was pitch dark. Lights had gone. Probably long ago, and every footstep kicked up a cloud of dust that almost choked me. I covered my mouth over with my jacket and navigated the old house the best I could, just between the little puddles of light that leaked in through the gaps in the old boards and the dust that covered the windows. There was nothing here, now. No sudden burst of movement of a single wind. The house was utterly silent. I saw her first from the glint of her eyes, then her body took form. Sat at the living room table, looking up at me. I recognized her. We'd been here before. She'd spoken to me before she went to the forest, and she never came back. She left her name with me, and I'd written it down and stored it close to my chest with the others. And now she sat across from me again, not a silhouette in an empty house. And as I sat, I met her eyes. She spoke. Her voice a little deeper now, a little raspy from the clouds of dust. And so every night he watched the devil on his tongue dream, and eventually he came to understand that he had seen it as an evil creature, a punishment from the gods, but he had no good nor evil in his actions. It was trying to survive. Any motive it had to project it onto it was simply a creation of language. Human thoughts applied to a non-human creature. But the devil had his own language, and knowing the language of the body, it had no need to speak. Next day he woke, and before the devil on his chest could scurry off, he held out one hand towards it, with the movement of the lines across his palm, as the devil looked on. The devil sat on his chest for a while, reading the lines on Ardashir had offered it. Eventually he walked down beside him and sat with him by the ragged trees. Then reached into a pouch hung from its belt, pulled out a soup bone and a carrot, and offered Ardashir a crude fire lighter as it would to scoop some water up into the pot hung from Ardashir's travel sack. Ardashir in turn sprinkled a rock of mountain salt into the broth, and offered the devil a stick of sweet bark to chew while the pot slowly boiled in the fire in the desert sun. The two sat together for a while, chewing bark and slurping the thin soup from carved wooden spoons. As the sun reached the top of the sky, the devil tucked away his fire lighter, sat back off towards the desert. When he left, he turned and gave Ardashir a small carved figurine of some great empress, clad in fine armor. Flanked by a fearsome sphinx, her body emerging straight from the wooden throne. Ardashir in turn gave the devil a rock of mountain salt, and spare knife from his travel sack. The devil bowed in appreciation, tucked away his gifts, and disappeared back off into the desert. She smiled, her teeth glowing like her eyes. Still bright white for a moment. I understood, but I couldn't hold it for long. I left her there, sat in the old Tesman house, but I found the back door padlocked shut again from the outside. And when I went back through, she was gone. Nothing left in the living room but dusty old memories. Front door was locked too, and there was nothing outside the windows. Maybe night had fallen. Maybe the dust was thicker than I thought. It was just a sea of black. I was about to smash the window when the waves came, sending me stumbling back in shock. I watched against the glass, my view a little clearer for the grime. They dragged back with me. As far as I could see out there, just waves. Furious waves of blackened sea, crashing in against the window. Then the wind howled again, roaring through the gaps in the old house, picking up the cloud of dust as if snow in a storm, and whipping them around. Pulling my jacket closer to my mouth, I managed to make it up the stairs just as the waves crashed through the window, ducking water pouring in, carrying up chairs and toys and old photos, and dragging them back out into the other. I scrambled through the rooms, one after another, but in each I found the same thing. Dust, old memories, rotting against the floor. Waves slamming against the window in animalistic fury. The wind screamed now. I thought it could deafen me, and the walls of the house began to rock, buckling under the weight of the water. It had risen now above my ankles, and so the waves and the wind-beaten rain threw themselves against the windows, cracks starting to form. Panic rose in me, panic with no place to go, tearing at the seams of my body in its frenzy to find some solution, something out of a terrible fate that seemed inevitable. As the water rose around my calves, I rushed out through the bedroom door, slamming it behind me. I seeing nowhere to go, I opened it again, and as I passed through, I had risen up above the room. I watched from above as the raging water tore the house apart. I watched the waves as high as mountains tore through the forest, sweeping away the trees, the houses, the road signs, and the streetlights in the tower all the same. Panic still beat around me in a fury, looking for some place to go, and soon I managed to find a tear in my body jerking around in the air as it fled me in a panic. Out through a rip in my side, just under my rib. I watched it go, fluttering off into the distance, and as the waves rolled through the world below, I was at peace again. A sudden sensation of falling, the sea getting closer and closer, seesaw burning my eyes and the water too giving way as I fell through it like air. I bounced to hit the ground, grasping that air as I tried to stumble to my feet in a panic. Then opened my eyes, I was back in the Tesman house, Tesman's family living room, not house. Lay on the floor, clouds of dust forming above me. All I could do was pull myself upright and try to catch my breath, but still my heart beating. Each gasp, pulling a little more dust in until I was scrambling out towards the back door, coughing all the way. Closed my eyes as I left, waterlogged and dry from the dust that had gotten into them. And when I managed to force them back open, I was in my own living room. There was a knock on the door behind me. Something was moving across the endless field, the endless sea of green that sat between the glass and the space behind it. Just as time the water and the dew between the mirror and the glass, space where my reflection used to live, something was moving. There, migrating a herd of them. In the morning, dew formed on their backs, glimmering in the endless sun, but it was still too bright to quite make out. Just a silhouette in the field, something else behind them, just out of reach, just out of mind. I knock at the door, another one. It's gone by the time I get there. Some small trick lay on the doorstep again, a lake-washed rock, or a bundle of sticks, or some crude cut idol. I put it with the others, down in the basement. We used to keep the things I found out in the woods. want to find some kind of meaning to them, something to link them together. Strange little creatures they cut from wood or the bundles of sticks and leaves that they left. It all just seems random, just the roaring of an animal, nothing more. I got out to the safe house but safe house doesn't come. Road trip is on and on, but the safe house, well, Safeway doesn't come. It's not where it was, and the road won't end. I just drive, and the sun gets hotter and hotter until I feel like I'll faint in the truck. At some point I pass out. I wake up by the side of the road, truck door open next to me. The sun had waned a little, so I get up and get back in, and I keep driving. The sun had waned, but I can't see it. I shouldn't be on the horizon now, but I can't see it. Though I can feel its warmth, and I can see it by its light as I roll down the forest roads, trees pushing as I close up against me as they can. As the stones throw away, maple seeds scattering now and then in the wind. I stop a moment and look around, but it's not there. Sun is gone down below. The moon is out, and the moon is swollen full, almost distant. Something pushing and moving around inside it like a liquid in a balloon, stretching its skin, sending faint, burning marks across its surface. Okay, let's see. We'll go to the main menu because I've been playing this vision now for over 40 minutes. I did not mean to do that. It just got really good. But yeah. This is a demo though, so I don't actually know how long it is truly, but it is called a list of people who went missing in the, excuse me if I butcher this, Scheleirland National Forest demo version. If you want to play this for yourself, see the rest of the demo, or but play the full game yourself. The full game I believe is like $6, but this is just the demo version. Of course, everything in relation to this game will be in the description below. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Of course, if you did, like, comment, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. And hopefully you had a good day, good yesterday, and better tomorrow. And I will catch y'all in the next video.